My name is Rebecca, and for most of my life, I thought I had things under control. I was a planner, the type of woman who made lists for everything: groceries, bills, birthdays, school projects, even family movie nights. Life felt easier that way, safer somehow, and raising my son Matthew with a clear sense of values was the most important task I ever took on. He was my only child, and after my divorce from his father, it felt like it was him and me against the world. But as any parent will tell you, no amount of planning prepares you for the unpredictable ways a child grows. Children surprise you. They stretch your patience, test your limits, and sometimes cross lines you never imagined they would. And that's exactly what happened with Matthew, one moment that forced me to see not only who my son was becoming, but also who I was as his mother. It all began on a quiet Sunday afternoon. The weather outside was warm, the kind of late spring day when the air smells faintly of cut grass and the hum of lawnmowers echoes down the street. I was sitting at the kitchen table, paying bills, while Matthew was upstairs in his room. He had just turned 15 a few weeks before, and like most teenagers, he seemed to live in his own little world. Half music, half video games, and entirely behind a closed door. I didn't mind that, not really. I remembered being a teenager once, desperate for privacy and space. But Matthew wasn't just withdrawn. Lately, he'd been different. Short-tempered. Secretive. Sometimes he'd say he was at a friend's house, but when I called, I'd learn he wasn't there at all. Other times he'd disappear into his room for hours, and when I knocked, he would answer in a clipped tone as if I were intruding on something important. That Sunday, I didn't expect anything unusual. But then I heard something, a noise that didn't belong. It wasn't music, it wasn't the low rumble of video game sound effects, and it wasn't Matthew talking on the phone. It was the unmistakable sound of drawers opening and shutting in my bedroom. At first, I froze. For a second, I thought maybe I had left the window open and the breeze was moving something around. But then I heard it again, more definite this time, the soft scrape of my nightstand drawer. My heart skipped. I stood up quietly and walked down the hall, the sound of my bare feet muffled on the carpet. The closer I got, the more I was sure. Someone was in my room. My son. When I pushed the door open, I saw him standing by my dresser, one of my personal journals in his hands. His eyes widened like a deer caught in headlights, and for a moment neither of us moved. My heart pounded with shock. He had crossed a boundary I never thought he would, the boundary of privacy and trust between us. "Matthew," I said, my voice trembling. "What are you doing?" He stammered, trying to come up with words, but none came out. He just held the journal, my handwriting spilling across the pages that held years of my private thoughts. Memories of my struggles after the divorce, fears I never spoke aloud, even stories about him when he was little. Those words weren't meant for anyone else, and certainly not for him. Tears stung my eyes. "Give that back to me right now." He handed it over, his hands shaking, his face pale. "I'm sorry, Mom," he muttered. I just wanted to understand you." The anger that had flared inside me twisted into something else, a complicated tangle of hurt and confusion. I wanted to yell, to ground him, to make sure he understood the gravity of what he had done. But in the same moment, I also wanted to know what had driven him to do it. That night, after the initial storm of emotions, we sat down together in the living room. The silence was heavy, but I forced myself to speak first. "Matthew, what you did was wrong. You invaded my privacy. Those journals they're a part of me. They're not for anyone else to read." He nodded, his head hung low. "I know. I feel like you don't tell me anything. You always seem so strong, like you've got it all figured out. But I wanted to know the truth. I wanted to know what you've been through." His words pierced me. I realized that in trying to shield him from my pain, I had built a wall between us. I thought I was protecting him by keeping my struggles hidden, but maybe I was only making him feel more distant from me. Over the next few weeks, something changed between us. The boundary he had crossed had forced a conversation we both needed, but didn't know how to start. I began sharing more with him. Not the burden of adult problems he couldn't fix, but pieces of my past, my mistakes, and even my fears. In turn, he started opening up about the things he was struggling with: peer pressure, school stress, the weight of trying to figure out who he was becoming. It wasn't an easy process. There were tears. There were arguments. There were moments when I wondered if we'd ever rebuild the trust that had been broken. But slowly, day by day, we found our way back to each other. And in the end, I realized that sometimes when a boundary is crossed, it doesn't just cause pain, it also creates an opportunity to rebuild on stronger ground. Because of that day, Matthew and I grew closer. I stopped pretending to be invincible, and he stopped pretending that he didn't need me. We became more honest with each other, and while the memory of that journal in his hands still stings, I can also see the gift hidden inside it. When my son crossed that boundary, everything changed, but not in the way I first feared. It changed in a way that made us both stronger, braver, and more connected than we had ever been before.